There is at least one area, however, in which the American political system appears simpler than that of most parliamentary systems. That is America's two-party system. Many countries have 10 or more parties in the legislature at any time, with each representing a particular set of values and programs. But this leads to another peculiarity of the American electoral process. I'm sure you have noticed the campaign for the 2008 presidential election. See, it began many months ago. Over 15 individuals declared their desire to run for president on either Republican or Democratic ticket. All traveled the country campaigning and participating in town hall meetings and debates. In fact, this table wasn't big enough to hold the number of Republicans or Democrats in the early debates. It needed a bigger table, and this is not that long. With that many candidates traveling around, Americans were able to follow these candidates through television and radio, newspapers and magazines, and on the internet. And, of course, YouTube is very popular right now as well. Why did these candidates start so early and work so hard when the election won't take place until November 8th? In the United States, the voters do not just elect the president among candidates elected by political parties. Registered voters also determine who will become the candidate for each party. Early in the year for presidential elections, each state holds a primary election or caucus. At the primary election or caucus, all the registered members of the same party vote for the party's presidential and congressional nominees to compete in the general election against the other party's nominees. The Democratic and Republican primaries began almost 2 months ago. The candidates have been campaigning to win the primary elections become the party's candidate in the general elections. At first look, it appears that the primary process would interfere with the process of building coalitions within the party. Each candidate tries to identify how he or she is different from the other candidate, and presumably better. Candidates collect support from various groups. When candidates realize they will not win and drop out of the race, they often suggest to their supporters that they vote for one of the remaining candidates. 2 important candidates chose to end their campaigns on January 29. When Senator John Edwards announced the end of his presidential candidacy for the Democratic Party, he said he had contacted the 2 remaining Democratic Party candidates, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. Edwards said, quote, "They have both pledged to me, and more importantly, through me to America, that they will make ending poverty central to their campaign for the presidency," end quote. He urged his supporters to support whichever of the candidates eventually became the Democratic Party nominee. On the Republican side, most recently, one who dropped out was Rudy Giuliani, a centrist Republican candidate. When he withdrew on January 29, he specifically endorsed John McCain, saying, "John McCain is the most qualified candidate to be the next commander-in-chief of the United States." As Giuliani recognized that he would not win, he attempted to strengthen the campaign of the other Republican candidate with whom he most agreed. So, in both cases, they were building a coalition. But to win the nomination and eventual election, McCain must also convince the conservative wing of the Republican Party to vote for him. John McCain, Mike Kirby, and Ron Paul are all still in the Republican Party race, fighting to attract these Republicans, largely conservative voters. At the beginning of the primary season, the candidates appealed to their party's voters often based on narrow issues. As the candidates come out of the race, the new candidates have to broaden their appeal to include more diverse groups. This summer, the Republican and Democratic parties will hold their national conventions. During these conventions, the candidates who receive the most votes from the state primary elections will be chosen to represent the party in the presidential and congressional elections. The winning candidate from the Democratic and Republican parties will compete against each other during the general elections. The general elections will take place at the convention, and the 2 main political parties will devote considerable resources to support the presidential candidates. For those of you who need an English lesson, when I say considerable resources, I mean lots of money. Lots and lots of money. As we look at America's complex electoral system, we should not lose sight of the purpose of that system. As any democracy, the process is designed to ensure that the nation's citizens exercise their rights to govern themselves through free and open elections. The electoral procedures that each nation develops ensure that people can freely choose their political representatives and decide the broad political direction their government will take. Let me make it clear that we do not wish to impose our electoral practices on any country. I'd like to close by noting that the electoral season in the United States continues to be very interesting. We Americans have various choices of candidates, yet we cannot take for granted our civil rights and our political freedoms. We must learn about the candidates and their positions. We should review carefully our choices, and we should exercise our power to choose our government. So that's the speech part, and I think